I'm going to talk to you about caregiver burnout. If you are a caregiver caring for other people in your life, whether it is a spouse who is ill, a child who is dependent, a child who has become ill, a child who maybe had an accident or some type of illness that caused the child to not be able to work and need care, if it is illness in another loved one, if it is aging parents, maybe one parent died and the other parent needs support and there isn't enough money to pay for that. All kinds of different scenarios where it is increasingly common for people to be struggling with caregiving for, say, an aged parent or a child who has, say, mental illness or some other problems, while still trying to juggle your normal parts of life or maybe even being a full-time caregiver. So how do you know that you're burned out? Well, burned out means you've gotten to the point of complete exhaustion. You're exhausted emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, relationally. It might also be financially, but in other words, you are just spent. You are just over the edge. I mean, this can happen. I've known people who've cared for a mom and a sick husband, who've cared for, a sick spouse and a child who was dependent with problems. So where they've actually had multiple children to take care of and yet still have to worry about bills and other responsibilities. I mean, that, like I said, the possibilities are endless. And it is an exhausting place to be. It is a demanding place to be. It is often never ending and very frustrating. You don't plan on being a caregiver. I mean, some people are a caregiver as a job, and that's kind of a different angle of when you know you're getting paid for it and this is your profession, then you have options with that. And also you don't have the feelings mixed in of where this is a family member, where you have the extra guilt and you won't have as much of the relationship dynamic that sometimes comes in when you are a caregiver of a loved one. So I know two women who were caring for a parent and a spouse, and both had illnesses, and the women were absolutely exhausted and older themselves, in their late 60s, early 70s, and literally got to the point where they themselves were in their doctor's offices. And I actually heard about both of these recently. And the doctor was telling these women, listen, it's time that you started thinking about yourself, because you're going to end up as sick as the people that you're taking care of if you don't figure out how to take care of yourself. Now, for both these women, this was a crisis, and it was kind of a shock because they had been ignoring their own health and not paying attention to themselves and just giving, 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 giving. And so it was kind of a wake-up call, like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So going home and letting the people that they were caring for know, hey, I've got to do some stuff for myself. They were shocked to find out that both their spouses and their parent was not happy about making sacrifices at all for them to begin to take care of themselves. Because people who are older, people that are dependent, a lot of times they get used to us taking care of them in a certain way, and they are not going to be flexible or adjustable. And especially as people get older, oftentimes they, and more with dementia, they get very demanding, and they get very entitled, and they get very dependent. So they were both surprised to find out that these loved ones were not happy about them making changes to prioritize their own health. So, geez, that puts you in a really difficult situation. So how do you handle this? Well, here are some basic thoughts that I've put together on things that you can do. First of all, do only what you have to do. Sometimes when we're in a family situation and we're caregiving, we have these ideas of perfection. I'm going to do this perfectly. I'm going to do everything that's demanded. I'm going to keep the house up the same way it was before. I'm going to cook the same way that I did before. I'm going to do all these extra things that I've always done. And you know what? That might not be possible. You might have to let go of some of those expectations and just do what absolutely has to be done. The second one is, you may not be used to this, but start to ask for help from other people in these people's lives. Maybe it's a neighbor that will come in and sit with them for a couple hours a few times a week while you go out and do something. Another family member who hasn't stepped up, or a grandchild. It could be a sibling. It could be a good friend of one of these two people who was in that person's life, who wouldn't mind coming over and staying with them, or taking them to a doctor's appointment, or maybe getting a senior transport or some type of regional center transport to take them where places they need to go, or with a doctor, or maybe there's some respite care, or there's an organization who offers that. I mean, just start getting creative to figure out, how can I get some outside help, and what can it be for? I've known people that even though they're there and they're doing the caregiving, they still set up Meals on Wheels for a couple of meals per day, and then maybe they only cook one meal, or they set up Meals on Wheels for a partial time. So that's an option. So just start thinking, how can I get help to lessen my workload, to give me a chance to do some other things and not to have to do everything? You want to leave some things undone to create a void so that others have to step in. If you have family members like siblings, grandkids, people that could do something, but they're not because you are, and they're so used to you doing everything that they're just like, no problem. I don't have to because you take care of it. You sometimes have to be willing to say, I'm not doing this for dad, or I'm not doing this for mom. And meaning somebody better step up. Somebody better do something, or this isn't going to be done. Because sometimes that's what it takes for other people to say, okay, fine, I'll do it. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, I can't do that because then my mom or my dad or my spouse or, this child or whatever is not going to get any help. But sometimes you have to do that if you really want people to stand up and do that. And I mean, obviously you want to pick things that aren't life or death, so you don't have the responsibility of somebody dying because you said you're not going to do something. But, start thinking, what can I just leave not done, and see what happens. The other thing is give yourself permission to take a break to recoup. And I mean, think again, can you go take a walk? Walks are super refreshing. If you're inside the house and you don't get outside, and then you go outside and you just de-stress by walking and by, just thinking about something else, maybe praying, looking at the outdoors, looking around you. I mean, it's okay if you want to take a walk, as long as that's safe to leave people, or if you want to go to the store for a little while, or, figure out, what kind of breaks can I take? Can I go sit on the patio with a cup of coffee and not be sitting next to this person who wants me to engage and talk constantly? Maybe I should just go outside and take this break, or maybe I should get myself a book that I'm reading all along so that I can get myself out of where I am and into this story, to just kind of have a mental break. There's all kinds of things you can do, maybe some special TV shows that you keep track of, and you don't always have the TV on for what they want, but you say, hey, tonight's my show, and you turn it on, and they have to watch your show with you. I mean, you may have literally gotten to where you are so used to just sacrificing everything that you don't actually ask for your needs to be met. So think about that. How can I take a break to recoup? Next one, you want to say no when you need to. Just no, not doing that, not willing to do that. So you don't feel, and without feeling guilty. Feeling guilty when you don't have to, when you haven't done anything wrong, is called false guilt. So you need to say no when you want to say no. It's okay to say no. This person wants you to drive them across country or drive them 4 hours to see a friend and then 4 hours back. You can say, no, I'm not willing to do that. Like, figure something else out. That's a great one to leave undone. Is there anybody in the family who wants to take dad to go see his friend Charlie? I'm not doing that. Perfect. Then the other one is to give yourself at least as much care and concern as you give your loved one. You got to convince yourself, I'm just as important. Actually, maybe you're more important, because if you're not around, who is going to care for these people? So maybe just like in the airplane, when you put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on the child or the elderly person beside you or the dependent person, put the mask on you so that you're breathing, so that you can put it on these people and take care of them. That's kind of like you have to think about your self-care. If I don't take care of myself first, I'm not going to be here. And then they're not going to have anybody. Then if your loved one is upset that you are doing everything you did before and you're saying no to some things and you're not jumping every time that person says jump, or cooking those dinners and you're getting something like Meals on Wheels or frozen food, like frozen lunches that you can pull out and stick in the microwave. When my husband goes out of town, I get myself frozen dinners. They're not the greatest. I don't want to cook, right? I want a break. And so it's just easy. I'm busy. I don't want to go get fast food or drive out to go pick something. I just stick one of those in there a lot of times. Make something really simple. So if they don't like that, tough, right? You get to say, okay, you get to detach from that and say, that's what I'm doing, right? And just don't engage in conversations. Don't defend it. Don't argue it. Don't try to convince them. Just say, it's the best I could do today, and drop it at that. So then do things as simply as you can and let go of perfection, just as simple as you can. You don't have to change the sheets every day. You don't have to change the towels every day. Towels don't have to be hung perfectly. You don't have to iron shirts if people are just staying at home. I mean, start thinking, how can I let go of the perfection that I've always had? And you can take that to whatever direction that you have in terms of the different things that you have to do. If you have loved ones, though, that could help, that refuse to help, because this is very common. I get this a lot. Loved ones siblings who could help but won't, grandkids that could help but won't. If you have that, you cannot make people do what they need to do. You cannot make people do what is the right thing. You have to make your choice of doing the right thing for yourself. We'll each stand before God ourselves, and we're not going to answer for what someone else did or didn't do. We're not going to be able to say, well, I didn't because my brother didn't, or I didn't because my sister didn't. We're just going to say, this is what I did. This is what I felt like I had to do. So if they refuse, then you have to be as creative as possible. You got to use outside resources. If your parents or the person has money, pay for caregivers, pay for extra help, pay for things to be done, and make sure that you use the resources to give yourself a break so that you don't, get stuck doing everything. You got to let go of that resentment, because that resentment will eat you up. You don't want to be doing this for your parent and angry all the time at your siblings or other people. You want to do it with joy in your heart as unto the Lord. And like I'm telling you, you got to do all these things. You got to take responsibility for doing all these things so that you don't burn out. That's your responsibility. How you do it is yours. Same thing with a child. I know people who have given their entire lives to their disabled children, the children that were born with disabilities, and they gave everything, and they were amazing. But in hindsight, they can look back and say, I should have given myself more, because I have given my whole life there. And then when you get to the other side and you realize, I did well, but I should have balanced it. I should have balanced it with taking care of me, because you need something or you will burn out, and it isn't good. And when you're burned out, you resent doing what you were doing. What you were doing before now becomes a chore, and it's hard, and you start to hate it, and you start to be resentful toward it. You find out that your exhaustion leads you to being irritable and to being cranky with people, and to end up being unhappy. And your own responsibilities and your other relationships maybe with your spouse or with your own children, will suffer, and you will not be as nice and good as you could have been. And also, when you have other people in your life, they're important too. You have to be able to, for your own health, keep up your other relationships and not lose yourself in the caregiving to where you hurt your other relationships. To a certain extent, they are affected and you can't control that, but you don't want to put yourself in a position where you are neglecting them when you could have done more for them, because you, again, will suffer for that more later too. So try to balance this as best as possible. I think there are ways to do it. You don't always see those when you're kind of stuck within it. You get caught up in it and you just, all you see is what you have to do. And it sounds really weird, but what I've learned to do in this situation in my life, because I have a situation that's ongoing where I am a caregiver, is I have learned to put myself first. And that might sound impossible to you, but I mean, take care of the things that need to be done, but have some boundaries and have some principles to where it's like, no, I'm going to do what I need to do for me. I'm going to take care of my own life. I'm not going to drop everything. I'm not going to be there at a moment's notice. I'm not going to pick up things that should have been done by someone else or should have been done that were left for me and then drop my own goals or my own plans last minute. I mean, I just have things with that where I have to, or I won't survive. I literally, if you allow there to be no boundaries when you're in a situation where you have dependent people or people that need a lot from you, if you have no boundaries, you'll lose your life in it. And so you have to learn how to do that. So I hope this is helpful. My other videos that even though they don't address caregiving, they do talk about relationships with difficult people in difficult circumstances, and all the principles apply to you too, as well as my new devotional, Change My Relationship, where it's 365 daily devotions for Christians in difficult relationships. So some of the scriptures I pulled out for this one, Proverbs 17:22 says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. When you're burned out, your spirit is just crushed. And it is like the opposite of good medicine. It's just making you sick. You will get sick eventually if you don't take care of yourself. And Ephesians 5:29 says, after all, no one ever hated his own body, but they feed and care for it just as Christ does the church. I love that, because that was basically Paul saying through the Holy Spirit, hey, it's normal to take care of your body. Everybody does it, and it's not natural not to do it. So go for it. Take care of yourself. It's normal. It's essential. It's okay. So that's a great admonition. I love that. And then Jesus's scripture, Matthew 11:28-30, and you probably know this one very well, that says, come to me, all you that are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So thank you for watching this video on Change My Relationship. And I hope that you will watch more videos, because I think they will be really, really helpful to you.